The unexpected return. Rain poured heavily over the city as black luxury cars stopped in front of the giant mansion. After 6 long months in Europe, Daniel Harrison finally returned home without telling anyone. Daniel was one of the richest businessmen in the country, cold, powerful, feared by many. But behind his success was pain. 3 years earlier, his wife had died while giving birth to triplets. Since then, Daniel buried himself in work and rarely spent time with his children. The mansion felt empty. The triplets barely knew their father. Only one person truly cared for them: the Maid. Her name was Emily Carter. Quiet, kind, humble. She treated the children like her own. As Daniel entered the mansion, the house was strangely silent. No servants, no music, no lights downstairs. He frowned. "Where is everybody?" he muttered. Then suddenly, he heard laughter upstairs. Children laughing. Real laughter. Something he had not heard in years. Daniel slowly walked toward the sound. And what he saw froze him completely. The shocking sight. Inside the nursery room, Emily sat on the floor surrounded by the triplets. Tiny toys covered the carpet. One child slept in her lap. Another braided flowers into her hair. The third hugged her tightly while giggling. And Emily. She was singing softly. A gentle lullaby. The children looked happy. Not rich. Not spoiled. Just loved. Daniel stood silently near the door. For the first time in years, he saw warmth inside his own house. Then one of the triplets noticed him. "Daddy." The room became silent. Emily quickly stood up nervously. "Sir, you returned early." Daniel ignored her words. His eyes stayed on the children. They ran toward him carefully, almost shyly, as if they were afraid of their own father. That broke something inside him. Little Sophie whispered, "Daddy, are you staying this time?" Daniel could not answer, because he realized something painful. The maid knew his children better than he did. A heart full of guilt. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He sat alone in his office remembering everything. The missed birthdays. The ignored phone calls. The promises he broke. Meanwhile, Emily tucked the children into bed. She kissed their foreheads gently. Daniel secretly watched from the hallway. The children smiled peacefully. Then he heard little Noah ask, "Miss Emily, will Daddy leave again?" Emily paused. Her eyes became emotional. But she smiled softly. "Your daddy loves you very much." Daniel lowered his head in shame. Because deep inside, he was no longer sure that was true. The hidden truth. The next morning, Daniel called Emily into his office. She looked nervous. "Sir, did I do something wrong?" Daniel stared quietly at her. Then he asked, "Why do my children love you so much?" Emily looked surprised. "Because they needed someone." Her answer hit him deeply. She continued carefully. "They cried for you many nights, sir." Daniel's hands tightened. Emily tried to leave, but Daniel stopped her. "Why didn't you quit?" Emily smiled sadly. "Because they already lost their mother." Silence filled the room. Then Daniel noticed something unusual. Emily's hands were covered with small burns and scars. Where did those come from? She quickly hid them. "It's nothing." But later, Daniel discovered the truth from another servant. Emily had secretly worked double shifts and sold her jewelry to buy medicine for the triplets when they became seriously sick months ago. She never told anyone, not even. Daniel felt completely shattered. A billionaire. Yet, the maid protected his children while he chased money around the world. The stormy night. That evening, a terrible storm hit the city. Lightning shook the mansion. Suddenly, one of the triplets developed a dangerously high fever. Panic spread everywhere. Before doctors arrived, Emily carried the child in her arms, staying awake all night beside him. Daniel watched helplessly. Emily cooled the child's forehead, whispered comforting words, and cried silently when his breathing became weak. Daniel finally asked, "Why do you care this much?" Emily looked at the sleeping child, then softly answered, "Because love doesn't need blood to be real." Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. For the first time since his wife's death, he cried. Seleta. The next day, Daniel entered his late wife's old room. Inside a drawer, he found a letter he had never opened. It was written before she died. "Daniel, if anything happens to me, please don't let our children grow up lonely. Money cannot replace love." His hands trembled. Then he noticed another line. "If someday you meet someone who truly loves our children, don't push them away." Daniel immediately thought of Emily. The truth about Emily. Days later, Daniel discovered another heartbreaking truth. Emily herself had once lost her family in a tragic accident. She understood loneliness better than anyone. That was why she loved the triplets so deeply. Not because it was her job, but because she knew pain. Daniel slowly began spending more time with his children, reading stories, eating dinner together, playing in the garden. And every time he struggled, Emily quietly helped him. The mansion slowly became a real home again. The final shock. One evening, Daniel returned home early once again. He heard the children talking inside the living room. Little Sophie asked Emily softly, "Will you leave us someday too?" Emily hugged the triplets tightly. "No, never." Then Noah smiled innocently and said, "I wish you were our mommy." Daniel stood frozen outside the door. Emily suddenly began crying silently. Not because she was offended, but because deep inside, she loved them like her own children too. That moment changed everything. A new beginning. Months later, the mansion looked completely different. Laughter filled every corner. The children no longer feared their father. Daniel became present in their lives. And Emily, she was no longer treated like a servant. One evening during dinner, Daniel looked at her and quietly said, "You saved this family." Emily smiled with tears in her eyes. But the biggest surprise came next. Daniel held her hand gently and asked, "Would you stay forever?" The triplets immediately cheered loudly. Emily covered her mouth in shock. And, for the first time in years, the broken family finally felt complete again.